You tried the programmable thermostats. You bought the space heaters, causing tripped breakers and scorched baseboards. You wrapped your windows in plastic shrink film, leading to peeled paint right off the trim. Every winter brings the same drafty rooms and the same freezing tile floors. You are starting to think this is just how old houses operate. My name is Noah Miller. For 30 years, I wrote checks to the utility companies, watching my heating bill climb while my living room stayed cold. Same draft, every winter. Unchanging reality. Is this just how it is now? We face demands to pay hundreds, even thousands for home heating. I found a system changing the math entirely, using a principle predating the electric grid. A community in the Midwest heats their homes for decades with a setup costing $50 to build. They live completely free from energy bills. What I am about to show you defies our modern understanding of energy costs. The industry wants this to remain a forgotten technique. I drove deep into Amish country to uncover the first piece of this puzzle. It is a principle so fundamental, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about heat. Keep watching. The practical part is going to flip your entire house upside down. Modern heating relies entirely on forced air. Your furnace blasts hot air into a room, filling the empty space. Modern builders shifted to hollow drywall and fiberglass. The warm air escapes through every tiny crack in your window frames, doors, and floorboards. It rises to the ceiling and leaks into the attic. You feel a temporary blast of warmth followed immediately by a chilling draft creeping across the floor. Think of a standard heating system like pouring water into a bucket full of holes. You keep the faucet running constantly just to maintain the water level. The furnace treats the symptom. The condition creating the symptom remains unchanged. You authorize a recurring payment to heat air leaving your house immediately. The industry needs you to accept this cycle as normal. The Amish approach relies on basic physics. They use heavy, dense materials to capture and hold thermal energy. Think of a dense cast iron skillet sitting on a low flame. You turn the burner off, and that skillet stays hot enough to cook an egg 20 minutes later. The material absorbs the energy and slowly releases it back into the room over several hours. It acts like a thermal battery, storing heat instead of electricity. We shifted to lightweight construction for faster building and cheaper shipping. The result is a home possessing zero thermal memory. Your house forgets it was ever warm the moment the power cuts out. A 2018 study in the Journal of Building Engineering confirmed that high thermal mass walls reduce peak heating loads by up to 40%. The Amish bypass academic studies. They just keep doing what works. They build interior masonry structures specifically designed to absorb combustion heat. They route the exhaust gases through a maze of heavy brick and stone. They capture heat from a single, highly efficient central burn point. They channel it through materials holding it for hours. The radiant heat warms your floors, your walls, and your furniture directly. It warms the physical objects in the room instead of the empty space. You feel a deep, penetrating warmth staying in your bones long after the fire burns down. I thought I understood how they did this. Then I stepped into a farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio, on a freezing January morning, and I realized I missed the most crucial element. The erasure of this method stems entirely from economics. A one-time $50 fix avoids generating recurring revenue. The HVAC industry thrives on selling complex machines with expensive replacement parts. Their profit margin depends on your system breaking down or running constantly. The knowledge of thermal mass was quietly pushed aside to protect a business model built on dependency. I learned this standing inside a working Amish woodworking shop. The temperature outside stood at 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, the room maintained a comfortable 70 degrees. I searched the room for a massive furnace or a web of ductwork. I saw a small steel barrel stove and a strange, heavy masonry wall behind it. I walked over and placed my hand on the brick. It radiated heat like the hood of a car parked in the summer sun. The builder told me the fire went out at dawn. That single sentence from an 82-year-old man is the reason this video exists. Have you ever noticed how your living room feels freezing the minute the furnace stops blowing? Does your house do this thing where the air near the ceiling feels sweltering while your feet remain completely numb? Have you ever noticed a cold, heavy draft rolling down your stairs despite all the windows being locked tight? If you said yes to even one of those, stay exactly where you are. Your home functions exactly the way the modern building industry designed it to function. You fight a battle against physics, and the house wins. The forced air rises, the cold air sinks, and your energy meter spins like a top. The Amish bypass this cycle entirely by altering the physical environment around the heat source. They force the heat to stay put. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about something costing about the same as a cup of coffee at a gas station. Most people throw it away or skip buying it entirely. Hardware stores stock it in the back corner of the garden aisle. It is the piece making everything else in this method work. It transforms a standard stove from a localized space heater into a whole house thermal engine. You probably have the raw materials sitting in your garage or backyard right now. The beauty of this system lies in its absolute simplicity. It operates completely free of electrical components. It runs independently of moving parts and Wi-Fi connections. You build it once, and it serves you for decades without a single maintenance call. Up until now, I have described the theory of thermal mass. What I am about to outline brings this into your own living room. It works in modern drywall homes just as well as it works in a century-old farmhouse. The answer is going to sound overly simple. Keep listening. But before we reveal their secret, let's understand the problem they've bypassed. I stood in that Ohio woodworking shop, pressing my bare hand against a simple masonry wall, still radiating heat hours after the fire died, and the modern math just stopped making sense. My own furnace back home cycled on constantly to fight the exact same 12-degree winter air, while this $50 stack of dense brick maintained a 70-degree room using only stored thermal energy. Why are we, the advanced society, still beholden to soaring energy bills while solutions like this are ignored? Is it simply ignorance or something far more deliberate? The answer to why we pay so much isn't just about efficiency, it's about control. And the Amish understood this long before the rest of us. Prepare to have your assumptions shattered. Have you ever noticed how the wall behind your electric baseboard heater turns black with soot, but the center of the room stays freezing? Does your house do this thing where the thermostat reads 72 degrees, but you still have to wear a heavy wool sweater just to sit on the couch? Have you ever noticed a sharp, metallic clicking sound coming from your ductwork right before a massive wave of cold air pushes through the floor vents? If you said yes to even one of those, do not go anywhere. You are experiencing the exact failure loop the heating industry relies on. You pad the walls with expensive fiberglass, you caulk the windows, and the heat still vanishes into thin air. You are starting to think your home is just inherently drafty. That is exactly the lie they need you to believe. The industry wants you to think insulation is the only answer. They sell you rolls of foam and plastic wrap to trap warm air that is actively trying to escape. They never tell you to change the nature of the heat itself. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about something that costs about the same as a cup of coffee. Most people throw it away or never buy it at all. It usually sits forgotten in the corner of a garden center. It is the piece that makes everything else work. I will tell you what it is shortly. Marcus Vance is 58 years old, living in Petoskey, Michigan. I found him standing in his detached garage on a Tuesday afternoon, winding up a heavy-duty extension cord with numb fingers. The space smelled like unburned kerosene, damp sawdust, and deep frustration. He owned a 1,200-square-foot workshop that he simply could not use for 5 months of the year. He had spent $3,400 on a commercial mini-split system the previous summer. When the temperature dropped below zero, the unit froze up and became a useless wall ornament. He was burning through $600 of propane every single month just to keep the pipes from bursting. I told him he could heat that entire space using scrap wood and $50 of masonry. I told him he could disconnect the propane tank entirely. He looked at me like I had suggested heating the room with a magnifying glass. He did not argue or yell. He simply dropped the orange cord, crossed his arms over his heavy winter coat, and stared at the concrete floor for a long time without saying a word. He finally kicked the leg of his workbench and said he did not have time for internet fairy tales. He was tired, he was broke, and he was freezing. I told him to give me one Saturday to prove him wrong. I promised him that if the system failed, I would pay for his next propane delivery myself. What happened next is something his neighbors still talk about today. The technique I showed Marcus is a horizontal thermal mass exchange. The Amish adapted it for their large woodworking shops, though it is technically known in masonry circles as a rocket mass heater. It changes the physical behavior of combustion. Think of a standard cast iron wood stove like a camera flashbulb. It burns blindingly hot, it throws intense energy into the air, and then it is gone. You have to keep feeding it constantly to maintain the light. This system acts like winding up a heavy grandfather clock. You put the energy in once during a short, intense fire. The heavy materials capture that kinetic energy and slowly release it over the next 24 hours. You need a standard 55-gallon steel drum, a pile of regular fire bricks, and a 6-inch steel stovepipe. You build a J-shaped burn chamber on the floor using the fire bricks. The wood feeds vertically down into the short side of the J, and the fire burns sideways before shooting up the longer internal chimney. This is where you need that coffee cup priced item. The secret is a $5 bag of coarse garden perlite. People throw it away when their potted plants die, never realizing it is a miracle material. You mix that perlite with a little wet clay and pack it tightly around the vertical burn chamber. Perlite is essentially puffed volcanic glass filled with microscopic air pockets. It acts as an absolute thermal barrier. Because the heat cannot escape through the perlite, it reflects back into the fire. The internal temperature reaches 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. That extreme heat completely vaporizes the smoke, leaving zero creosote and zero chimney fire risk. In his foundational book, Rocket Mass Heaters, Yanto Evans documented how this exact insulated burn chamber reduces wood consumption by up to 90%. The efficiency is not theoretical, it is a documented thermodynamic fact. Once the exhaust leaves that internal chamber, it hits the inside of the steel drum and cools rapidly. It then pushes down and out through 30 feet of horizontal stovepipe laid flat on the floor. Not 20 feet, not 40 feet. 30 feet is the exact length needed to extract all the remaining heat before the exhaust safely exits the building. You bury that entire horizontal pipe in a thick mixture of ordinary sand, clay, and straw. You build a solid bench over the pipe, 18 inches high and 24 inches wide. Most contractors will claim the smoke will just back up into the room. They do not understand fluid dynamics. The extreme heat in the insulated riser creates a massive draft, aggressively pulling air down the feed tube and forcefully pushing the exhaust horizontally. Once lit, it physically cannot smoke back into the room. Others worry a masonry bench is too heavy for a standard floor. A typical residential concrete slab handles 3,000 pounds per square inch easily. The broad base of the bench distributes the weight perfectly, exerting less pressure per square foot than a parked truck. The precision matters in the gap between the internal brick chimney and the top of the steel drum. It must be exactly 2 inches, not 3 inches, not 1 inch. 2 inches creates the perfect vortex, forcing the hot gases to roll down the sides of the barrel smoothly. I helped Marcus pack the last bucket of wet clay over the horizontal pipe. We dropped a handful of pine twigs into the feed tube and struck a match. The result was immediate. 2 months later, I drove back to Petoskey to check on Marcus. His propane bill for January was exactly $0. He had not turned on the expensive mini-split system a single time. His 1,200 square foot shop sat at a constant, comfortable 72 degrees. His skeptical brother-in-law came over during a week when the outside temperature hit -4 Fahrenheit. The brother-in-law walked into the shop, felt the deep heat radiating off the clay bench, and immediately pulled out a notepad to ask for a materials list. Marcus looked at me and delivered the line I will never forget. He said, "I threw away every space heater I owned, and I told the propane company to come get their tank." The impact went far beyond just the air temperature. Because the shop stayed permanently warm, the massive temperature swings stopped. That eliminated the condensation forming on his heavy cast iron table saw. His expensive hand tools completely stopped rusting. Because the tools were safe and the air was warm, he started taking custom woodworking orders in February instead of waiting for the spring thaw. Eventually, his wife started parking her car in the attached bay just to take advantage of the radiant heat bleeding through the shared wall. But the real genius isn't just in the material. It's in how they harness a force we take for granted, a force that costs absolutely nothing. It's simpler than you think, and that's the beauty of it. This $50 system relies entirely on earth, steel, and exhaust routed intelligently. It is the rocket mass heater, a thermal battery capturing the kinetic energy of a handful of wood and trapping it inside a dense masonry bench. I drove away from Marcus's shop that day, staring at the dashboard thermometer reading -4 degrees, feeling a heavy knot in my stomach. I had honestly doubted whether a pile of firebricks and a bag of perlite could genuinely outcompete a $3,400 commercial heating unit. Seeing his propane bill drop to absolute zero forced me to confront the thousands of dollars I had wasted over 30 years trying to heat empty air. I went home that afternoon, looked at my own furnace, and realized I had been funding my own robbery. Now that you understand the what, the next question is, why isn't everyone doing this? The answer points directly at our modern system. This journey reveals exactly what was taken from you and how incredibly simple it is to take it back. We have been conditioned to believe that surviving the winter requires a monthly subscription fee to a utility monopoly. We authorize those recurring payments because corporate cartels and industry lobbyists deliberately erased the traditional, time-tested wisdom that once kept our ancestors warm. They quietly pushed aside the fundamental physics of thermal mass to ensure their profit margin stays permanently high. They designed your home to leak energy, so you must buy it back from them every single day. You are a self-reliant, critical thinker who trusts real, verifiable evidence over corporate-backed modern systems. You have the power to reject their terms and their bills entirely. The forgotten technique of the rocket mass heater proves that absolute self-sufficiency remains a documented reality. It proves you can unplug from the modern matrix of consumer dependency right now using basic materials sitting ignored at your local hardware store. The power to sever that dependency rests literally in your hands. I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me the specific room in your house that you have been fighting the longest. Tell me exactly how many dollars you have spent on space heaters and weather stripping trying to keep it warm, and how quickly the cold always returns. Write it down so others can see we fight this battle together. The Amish retained the knowledge of how to capture energy, and now you possess that exact same wisdom. We must move past treating the symptoms. We must change the environment itself. That plastic shrink film you wrap around your windows every November stands as a monument to a broken, dependent system. Build the thermal mass, capture the heat you create, and step out of the cycle forever. The truth is often inconvenient for those in power. How could a system this simple, this cheap, and this effective be systematically suppressed by the modern housing industry? You only have to look at the financial math of the American home. If every house in the Midwest installed a $50 thermal mass system, a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure of propane deliveries, natural gas lines, and expensive furnace replacement parts would collapse overnight. Nobody held a secret meeting in a smoke-filled room to ban firebricks and perlite. They didn't have to. They simply standardized building codes that favored lightweight, hollow construction. They built homes that leak energy by design, ensuring you remain a lifelong paying customer just to survive the winter. But the Amish didn't just build a heating system. They built a fortress against dependency. And their method works for any home, not just theirs. Stay with us to see how you can apply these principles. Think back to those programmable thermostats you bought. Think about the space heaters that tripped your breakers and the heavy plastic shrink film you spent hours taping over your window frames. You bought into that cycle because you were told the cold was your fault. You were told your house just wasn't sealed tight enough, or your furnace wasn't modern enough, and the only solution was to authorize another recurring payment. Marcus Vance used to believe that same story, writing $600 checks every month for a propane tank he no longer owns. The knowledge of how to hold heat was quietly pushed aside to protect a profit margin. This was never about heating a room. It was about what was taken from you and how simple it is to take it back. I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me the specific room in your house that you have been fighting the longest. Tell me exactly what expensive products you have tried in that space and how the cold always returns. I am asking because the next video I make comes directly from the problems you write down there. We are going to dismantle these engineered failures one room at a time, using the traditional methods that were deliberately left out of the manual. That programmable thermostat on your hallway wall is not a tool for comfort. It is a meter tracking how fast your money escapes into thin air. Turn the dial to 0, build the mass, and keep the fire exactly where it belongs. The path to true energy independence is clearer than ever. I sat on this $50 masonry blueprint for 6 months before making this video, wondering if anyone would actually mix clay and perlite in their garage on a Saturday afternoon. I decided to publish it today because I recognized that exact same quiet frustration in you that I felt staring at my own spinning utility meter. The Amish remind us that true independence isn't about complex technology, but about timeless wisdom. Are you ready to reclaim your freedom from endless energy bills?